What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Saturdays in the SEC, episode 109. We finally have a 12-team playoff finalized. We're sitting here tonight, March 7th. Spring ball around the SEC has kicked off, so we got a lot of burning questions that we're wondering and going to watch for this spring. The future playoff format is very much up in the air. We have the 12-team playoff for at least 2024 and 2025, but 2026, we've already been discussing a 14-team playoff. Could be 16. I think it's very much up in the air right now as far as what the format's going to be. Is there going to be automatic bids? How many automatic bids per conference? Looks like more conference realignment is likely on the horizon, probably in this calendar year before football season kicks off. So, really a lot of things up in the air, undecided at this time within college football. But kind of starting off with the 12-team format, I've pulled it up here on the College Football Playoffs website. Kind of break it down for those of you if you haven't really been paying attention, and obviously it's after the season, but as they say, there's no off season at Saturdays in the SEC. But so under the 12-team playoff format that'll begin this fall, the four highest ranked conference champions will be seeded 1 through 4, and they'll receive a first round bye. Then teams seeded 5 through 12 will play each other in the first round on the home field of the higher ranked team. So obviously it'll be 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, and so on and so forth. What's your initial thoughts on this, on the 5 automatic qualifiers and having 7 at large? I will say I'm glad they went this way rather than it being 6 and 6. Initially it was going to be 6 automatic qualifiers, 6 at large, but obviously with conference realignment and the way things have unfolded, that just really didn't make any sense anymore. So it was a step in the right direction going to 5 and 7, but what's your kind of thoughts on the overall?
Is it not? Is it not the
Now,
first? Is it not the top 4 get a bye, and then 5 through 12 play? So
that's correct. Yeah.
it's the 4 highest ranked conference champions are automatic bids, right?
I believe it's 5. So the first
5
4 teams get a bye, but it's the 5 highest ranked conference champions
are automatic.
are automatic qualifiers.
Okay, I see.
And then the top 4, 1 through 4, will get a first round bye, so they won't play to the quarterfinals.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I was confused. I thought you were saying that 5 of them get a bye, but no, miscommunication on my end. I thought this is about how it should go or how it would go. You'd have, you'd have the first 4 first round bye, and then 5 through 12. I think that's the best way to do it. I'm super excited to see how it plays out. I mean, man, we went from hating the BCS to get us a playoff, 4 teams. Well, we clearly show 4 teams isn't enough, and now we're jumping to 12. We haven't even taken a snap in the season in the spring ball of the season or in fall practice before season starts, and everybody's wanting to already talk about changing it. But I mean, obviously that's always going to happen, especially with the way the era that college football is in nowadays. But I like this setup. Honestly, I think it's going to do, set up for some really, really exciting games. It's more football. You can't be mad about that. But I really like the fact that they're going to be able to host that's what's going to be crazy. It's the environments and the atmospheres around these teams they get to host in that first round of the playoffs. That's going to be insane because in the quarterfinals is when all the bowl games are introduced to it and everything like that. But those first round home games are going to be incredible. I'm so excited already to watch the first game of that. Whoever decides to be, no matter if they can kick off at 8:00 in the morning. It's going to be one of the most badass environments you've ever been in, no matter where it's at. Mm-hmm. So I really like this. But college football, man, it's moving the way that for how we've known it for so long, our whole lives, it's going to be completely different and it's going to be changed forever. The games and the product on the field on Saturdays is going to be the same. It's still going to be football, still going to be high level talent, high level entertainment. But everything around it, the aura around it, it's all different. They're going to eventually, within the next, I think, 2 to 3 years, going to all be considered if you're a high Division I, what is considered a Power 5 now. I feel like a lot of those teams are going to break off 65 teams, maybe 30 to 60 teams is what I feel. Probably more in the 60 range. And I think they're going to break off and have like a powerhouse conference and be considered professional football players. I think that's the way, from everything I've read and everything I've heard on the radio, I think that's the way it's trending, is that these guys are going to eventually become professional athletes at the college level, and then they're going to break away from the G5s and things and teams along those lines. So I think there's going to be some teams that are considered Power Five right now that are going to go to G5, and I think there are some teams that you wouldn't expect be considered are going to go in that pack with the big dogs. Going to go like BYU, I think would go. Obviously, Notre Dame would go, and they would have to probably join a conference because it's looking like it's going to be the Big Ten and the SEC is just going to branch off. But it's going to be more than what we know as the Big Ten and the SEC. There's going to be so many more teams added. Like I said, I believe the number I've heard is around 65. Is that right? Around 65 teams is probably what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think because I think most are going to end up in the SEC or Big Ten. So I think by the time all's said and done, I think the SEC and Big Ten, they'll probably have 20, 22 members apiece, probably. I think you can probably expect at least 5 or 6 more, probably 6 more teams at least, probably joining the SEC and the Big Ten. Yeah. I think you'll probably have the 2 super conferences, and then you may have one more additional third conference, maybe something along those lines. But obviously, it's not going to equal the strength of either of those two. Like they're kind of going to be on a pedestal of their own. But yeah, I could see something like that, like 60 teams, 65, something of that magnitude, kind of being what the FBS, like the FBS now is what, 130 teams.
Yeah,
I think those 65 will be more the FBS, and then everybody else will kind of be in a separate division.
And everyone else will be, I believe, controlled or under the NCAA, so it would be like Division III, Division II. Things like that. It would be ran the same way as that is what I'm understanding through these conversations and articles I've read. And then the FBS would be what we just talked about, the super conference, and that would be like it is now. They would be or not like it is now. They wouldn't be under NCAA anymore. They'd be professionals, and it would be ran. The postseason will be ran the same way, but it would be like, how the trophy of every national championship in the NCAA, doesn't matter what level it is, no matter what sport it is all the same. It's that brown wooden. It's got like the little, oval at the bottom, and then kind of like a little tower, and it says whatever sport it is. And well, that's every single sport in the NCAA. That's their national championship trophy, except for football. That's the only one that's different. So when this breakaway happens, you're going to have what's known as the G5 now will be the FCS or whatever. And they're going to be controlled by NCAA Division I, and then their trophy is going to be that now. Just watch it happen, I'm telling you.
Yeah. So on this 12-team playoff, I kind of want to get your thoughts. I like the format overall, like the five automatic qualifiers and the 7 at large. I think that makes a lot more sense for where we're at now. There's one slight change I would make, and I want to get your opinion on that as well. So obviously, the first 4 or the top 4 teams get a bye. So obviously they won't play in the first round. They won't play to the quarterfinals. Well, the quarterfinals are going to be played at the New Year's Six Bowl site.
Yeah.
Is where the quarterfinals. So for this year, for example, it'll be the Fiesta Bowl, the Peach Bowl, Rose, and Sugar will host the quarterfinals. And then the semifinals will be at the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl. And then the championship, obviously, it varies every year. So neutral site as well. The only change I would make, I think, I would like to see the quarterfinal round also be held on campuses. The reason I say that is because your 1 through 4 teams, they get a bye. But in a way, they kind of get punished because they're never going to get a chance to host a home game, a home playoff game.
That's true.
You know what I mean? And I think, too, it cuts down on travel for fans because you're already asking them to go, if your team makes it, to a semifinal and then obviously a championship site. So now you're adding additional travel to a quarterfinal game. I think it would be cool if the quarterfinal rounds were played on campus as well. That way, if you're a top 4 team, you're guaranteed to host a playoff game as well because you've earned that right for being
Yeah,
the
I
top 4
agree.
team, in my opinion. But you get the bonus of getting a first round bye, but you get knocked out of hosting a home playoff game. Like
Yeah,
you said, the atmosphere will be through the roof. So that's the one change I think I would make. I think it would. I think it would be cool for teams that have earned that. If you're a top 4 seed, and then I think for fans in general, I think it would cut down on travel a little bit more because, like I said, with some teams you have neutral site game, you may have a neutral site game during the season, and then asking them to travel for a quarterfinal, a semifinal, and a championship game to a neutral site just seems like a lot for fans to kind of the burden of. So
yeah,
I would like to. That was probably the one change I would make. Outside of that, I pretty much like the 12-team format. Think it makes a lot of sense. I would probably prefer it stay at that than keep going to
yeah.
14, 16, all that
I
nonsense.
agree.
I think 12 would probably be more like that. But that would be the one change I would make. Do you kind of feel the same way, or,
Yeah,
or is there
because
anything you would change?
you're a logical thinker and you don't think money signs the first thing you think of when you see college football. If it wasn't for the money, they probably would have the first 4 teams hosting their home sites. But now they get more exposure on the bowl games,
Mm-hmm.
more money, more money, more money. That's all they think about. So I agree with you. I like the way it's set up. I don't want to change and go to more teams. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I it I don't want to. I've heard these people saying it's like the participation trophy aspect. I get that, and I don't think it's going to become that because there's not going to be where just say there's 60 teams. There's not going to be where all 60 teams are in the playoffs. It's just not going to happen. It's the more you grow it at times, though, the worse it could get. I mean, supply and demand is a real thing for a reason. Like college football or football in general wouldn't be as big in popularity if it was played year round. That's just 100% fact because you would eventually get worn down on it. It's great and more exciting, and we love it a little more, and we care more, and it's more captivating when you're there because it's only for 4.5 months, like 5 if you're a lucky team. So like it's going to stretch into 6-7 months is what it seems when they're talking about all these teams adding. Teams 12 and 11 are not going to win the national championship. Teams 13 and 14 that are left out are not going to win the national championship. 1 in every 100 years, maybe. Those teams are just not going to win. So who cares? Like the battle of 5 and 6, yes, is a real legit, conversation piece. But the battle of 13, 14, 11, 12 doesn't matter. They're not going to win. They might win 1 game. Hell, they might even win 2. They're not going all the way. A team that's ranked 11, 12, 13, 14 is ranked that low, or it's not even low, but is ranked there for a reason because they're not better than the teams that are ranked higher than them. And on a consistent basis, the higher ranked teams in multiple weeks are probably going to beat them more than they're going to beat them in a row. That's just my opinion. I think the stretching it is for what? Obviously more money, but it's become a little ridiculous, and they need to hone down a little bit. Because, I mean, if you stretch it to 24 teams, that's just more games, more weeks. You're just making the season even longer. Excuse me. And then what are you going to do about the recruiting aspect? How's recruiting going to change and all this? It's crazy, man. Like the calendar for college football is all the way screwed up. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, too, because I think, and I think hopefully they are smart enough to like you don't want to expand it so much that the regular season becomes so insignificant. And
Yeah.
same with conference title games. And I was kind of listening to Josh Pate on his show talk about, obviously he's not big on the expansion and stuff, but he's like one thing about the SEC and the Big Ten, they're not going to sign up for something that significantly decreases the impact of the regular season and conference title games because they make so much off conference title games. So those aren't going anywhere. So I don't think they're going to sign off on anything that just decreases the regular season so much. I mean, obviously, when you expand a little bit, it does become a little less insignificant, but hopefully, it won't be to the amount to where, it becomes just not, I won't say obsolete's not really the right word, but you know what I mean. Like it's
Yeah, I
expanded
understand.
so much to where the regular season games just don't really mean that much at all. So hopefully I don't think we'll get to that point because I do think they do realize how important that is, and that's
Yeah,
what makes college football special is
yeah.
how important the regular season is and how difficult it is to make it to the playoffs and make it that far. So um, we'll see, but yeah, it's definitely crazy. And as far as the future playoff formats with 26 and beyond, um, there's I think proposals flying around left and right now. I think everything's still up in the air on the table. So don't really have any news on. There's been some floated proposals out there, but I saw one that was going to give I think it was I can't remember 8 auto bids maybe or something, but it was like 3 auto bids for the SEC, 3 for the Big Ten, like 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12. Like I don't know. I
I
like
don't like that
less
at
auto
all.
bids in my opinion. Like I would rather just hey let's put in the 12 best or 14 best or whoever. Like
Yes,
I'm for less auto bids personally because I
yes.
think that way you get more of the best teams in there. But um, now I hope it doesn't get to a format where we just have like 8 or 10 automatic qualifiers. I just in college football, I just don't think it makes as much
Yeah,
sense.
I don't. That would water down the regular season. It would make it would be bad for content for them. I don't think they should do that. And I think if they go to that, they would go away from it quickly. But luckily, we get 2 full seasons without having to worry about it. But
Yep.
what's crazy is I remember 2 seasons ago when they announced there was going to be a 12-team playoff, and you're like, damn, man, 2 years away. It's so long. And it's like, now it's here. It's right around the corner. Next football season is here. So that expansion and stuff, whatever's happening, it's going to come quick. It's going to come a lot quicker than we think it's going to come. Because I remember watching Paul Feinbaum the day they announced the 12-team playoff, and I was like, man, I wish that was next year. Not 2 years away. Now it is next year. It's here.
Yeah, same with conference
Yeah,
realignment.
right. Yeah,
It
yeah.
seems like just yesterday, they announced Texas and OU were coming to the SEC, and it's going to be the summer of 2024, and you're like, man, it seems like a little ways away, and boom, here. I mean, here we are.
We're
We're
here in
going into
July.
that
They're
season.
officially SEC members.
Yeah, so it's going to be crazy. We got to start our previews a little bit earlier. We got to include one extra week with 2 teams, so it's going to be exciting. I am looking forward to that a lot. Um, but I did want to get into some spring football questions kind of around the league as teams are breaking camp now. Um, what are some burning questions kind of around the SEC for some specific teams that you're really wondering about or kind of looking forward to finding out more about this spring as we kick it off?
The quarterback position for Mississippi State, South Carolina, because you got Sellers and Robbie Ashford's there now. So how that's going to shake out? That's really the biggest question, in my opinion, for the quarterback play when it comes to the SEC. And I guess Kentucky, just because I'm curious to see how Vandergrift's going to play. I think they're in good hands, but I'm just that they're in a different quarterback question boat than South Carolina, Mississippi State. Because what is Mississippi State going to do? Will Rogers is gone. They're relying on the true freshman coming in. That's what I'm believing. So how is the quarterback situation going to work out in South Carolina, Mississippi State? It's my biggest questions, outside of Auburn and Alabama, obviously.
Yeah, kind of speaking on Alabama a little bit. Obviously, I mean it's kind of an obvious question, but how does the new coaching staff gel with so many different pieces there now? How do they gel with the remaining team that's there? Obviously, lost some key pieces, but also retained a big bulk of the roster. So I'm really curious. I think early returns. Obviously, they've only had 2 practices, but the energy, the vibes seem really good, thus far. Obviously a different vibe. They're playing music at practice now. I mean, it's definitely a change, and watching Kalen DeBoer his first press conference and him walk up there with a hat, Nick Saban never wore a hat other than his straw hat on the practice field, but he never wore a hat during games or during press conferences or anything like that. So it's definitely different, but I think a lot of it's good though. I mean, I think obviously keeping some key things in place. They still do the 4 quarter program, keeping a lot of things in place. But with Kalen DeBoer, like you got to be your own man at the same time. Like you can't try to be Nick Saban. You can't try to be somebody that you're not. So I think keeping a lot of the core principles in place and the way some of the things were done, but you also have to put your own twist on it because, like I said, it's his program now. So, but early returns have been good. Just through the first week and just the energy from the coaching staff, the players seems to be really good. So, but I want to see how that develops throughout spring ball as we move through. I look at Arkansas, Bobby Petrino back at Arkansas now. I mean, one of the craziest stories of the offset of the coaching cycle. Bobby Petrino back calling plays. He used to be the head coach. Now he's under Sam Pittman. That offense was bad last year. I think they only averaged 20 points a game in SEC play. Having to replace KJ Jefferson, how does that go? How can he kind of reignite that offense a little bit? Because they've had some pretty good offenses under Pittman, but last year it's bad. The offensive line was really bad last year, so I want to see if he can kind of get those things, turned around, get that offense going in the right direction. Then I look out in Austin, Texas, with the Texas Longhorns. A big key to their success last year, obviously, Sarkisian's recruited extremely well there. He's got that program on the right track, and obviously making the playoffs last year was huge for them. But they lost a ton of production on the defensive front. I mean, that's one of the main reasons they ended up making the playoffs and were as good as they were. They were pretty dominant on their defensive line. They have to replace a lot of production up front. And then at the wide receiver position, they lost all their pass catchers basically from last year. Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell. They lost 3 or 4 key guys at receiver. Obviously hit the transfer portal hard. Isaiah Bond, Amari Niblack, Matthew Gold, guys like that are out there now. Quinn Ewers is due for a huge season, but they're going to have those guys kind of step in and seamlessly, kind of cover that production from last year. So it's really an all new, pass catcher group for Texas. So I want to see kind of how that relationship gels. And then LSU last year, one of the worst defenses in the SEC.
Nuss bus.
Nuss bus, man. I'm excited to see that. But I think as we document on this podcast, we're very, high on him, high expectations for him. I think he's going to do very well. But for me, the key's on the defensive side of the ball. One of the worst defenses in the SEC last year. There's no reason LSU's defense should ever be that poor. They completely reworked that defensive staff. I thought they did a really good job replacing, retooling that staff. Obviously, I mean, when it was that bad, you knew there was going to be pretty wholesale changes. But Blake Baker, the Missouri defensive coordinator, coming down now at LSU, think he's going to do a really good job. I think it's going to take time, though, because the personnel they have on defense, I do think they'll take a big step forward next year, but I do think it's going to take a little bit of time before you really see that develop. I think it's going to take probably more than 1 year, but Bo Davis, really well-respected defensive line coach, been around the league, been around college football for a long time. Corey Raymond, been around the league a long time. Kevin Peoples, really good edge coach, outside linebacker coach. So I think they did a really good job rehauling that defensive staff. But those are kind of some of the key things I'm going to be keeping a close eye on as we go through spring ball.
Absolutely. Also, with Auburn, how is the young wide receivers? How are they going to perform this spring? That's the big thing. Competition, man. Get out there, compete. What is he going to put them through, and what challenges is he going to put in front of them to make them overcome? Things along those lines. What are they out there? Are they out there with the right mindset? Or are they out there like, let's just get through spring, let's get it over with? That makes a big difference, especially with how young the guys are, still lacking depth in certain places. The young wide receivers are expected to play. Cam Coleman shining bright out there. Hugh Freeze talked about him, said he expected him to play early on in his career there. Obviously, that's the number one receiver in the class. You expect that to happen no matter where he landed at. But how are they going to mature throughout the spring and then in the off season, going to the fall, getting ready for the season? Obviously, there's going to be mistakes. They've never played at this level before, but how are they going to mature themselves and get ready? Hugh Freeze is actually doing something a little different this year with his spring. He's going Monday or Thursday, Saturday. He's doing full pads and they're hitting, lighting each other up. And then Tuesdays is what he's calling a learning day. So I'm assuming they're going to be in the film room and outside doing little walkthroughs and stuff like that. But he said we're really diving into, teaching and learning our new system because they're changing the offense from what it was last year. They're changing the verbiage back to what Hugh Freeze is comfortable with. They're making a little bit of tweaks to the offense. It's not going to be a full 100% completely different offense, but they're making changes and going back to what Hugh Freeze is comfortable with and getting his verbiage down in there. So they're learning all that, obviously learning the playbook and working through that. But he's saying that this is a very important part to what he thinks is for this team right now is just that he's calling it teach me, teach me, teach me. It's what there's been multiple videos of him on Twitter saying this to the team in team meetings. So I'm excited to see where this gets Auburn, especially with how, like I said, how young and inexperienced they are at certain positions where they're lacking depth. So I'm ready to see how the older guys, what kind of leadership they take over. Hugh Freeze raves about Peyton's ability or his leadership ability. Says he does believe that it is Peyton's job to lose, but it's definitely an open competition. He said it's nobody's job right now. He said, but I will tell you, I do think it's Peyton's job to lose. So, we'll see how that goes. Walker White, true freshman's on campus now, pushing him and Holden Garner, along with Hank Brown, shine in the bowl game. That was about the only good thing from the Auburn bowl game this past year. But so I'm excited to see how this team comes together, as a team. Or are they really a true team? Are they going to, there was talks last year about Auburn season that the locker room wasn't in the right place at all times throughout the season. And so they've got to get on that right page and completely buy in. You can't have 60, 70% buy-in. You got to have the whole team buy in, and that's how you get to the next level. And so I'm excited to see where this team goes from start of spring to end of fall camp going into week one.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see Cam Coleman. I mean, obviously, I think he's hadn't even caught a pass yet, hadn't even caught many in spring practice probably, but he's in my mind probably the number one guy. Like I think he's a day one starter, probably a number one receiver the second he stepped on campus. So I am excited to watch him play. And obviously Peyton Thorne, has to do a lot of improving from last year for sure, but I'm curious to see, are they able to step up around him? Because like I said, we talked about this last year. When he was at Michigan State, when he had a good run game, when he had a better offensive line, we saw him be much more effective. In 2021, I believe it was, he had Kenneth Walker, had a better supporting cast around him. That following year, he just didn't really have that. And, obviously the production suffered. So I want to see, obviously, with the influx of talent at skill positions, even though it's young, I think that's going to help a lot. Hopefully get a more consistent running, offensive line running game for him. Because I do think he can be very effective if he's got the right pieces around him. So not only does he need to take a big step forward, obviously the cast around him's got to do the same thing. And I think if it does that, that's going to help him out probably more than anything. Another year in the system, even though they are changing, like you said, some of the verbiage is going to be more what Hugh Freeze is comfortable with. But I do expect him to take a good step forward. I think that support cast around him is going to be a lot more talented than what he had a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. If he got time in the pocket to set his feet and make a throw, he'll be all right. Offensive line was not great last year, and that's been a problem for Auburn the last couple of years. Seems like an ongoing trend ever since 2013, 14, 15. Really hasn't been one super competitive. 2017 was okay. 2019, but you got to get consistent there, and then Auburn has a chance to really compete on a higher level on a more consistent basis anyway. Because yeah, the backfield, the running back room, it's the best room on campus. It's one of the best rooms in the SEC. There's no problems there. It's the guys up front making the way for them. That's what's got to get better.
Yeah. I want to ask you too. We mentioned this in a conversation earlier, but the Chris Lowe article that dropped, I believe yesterday or the day before, and for those who haven't read it yet, Chris
Great
Lowe at
read.
ESPN, he broke the news that Nick Saban was retired. He's really tied in with the program down there in Tuscaloosa. So, um, he's a guy that I trust his word on. I trust his reporting because this is a guy like he's not just throwing stuff out there. He's very, very accurate. So I thought it was a really well written article yesterday, very
Oh yeah.
insightful stuff. Some stuff obviously kind of an inside that 49 hours between Nick Saban retiring, Kalen DeBoer being hired, kind of the thought process within those 49 hours, and then also, Nick Saban's thoughts of kind of his decision to step away. What were some of the factors that kind of led to that? So I just thought it was a really well written article. And I just kind of want to get your thoughts on it, what your takeaways were.
The biggest takeaway I had was that Saban had gone to Greg Byrne and told him, hey, probably going to have to start evaluating this on a year-to-year basis from now on to see if I want to continue to do this or not. And so that was probably the biggest takeaway I had. Because like, man, we're seeing the best to ever do it. And he talks about how much he loves it and why he keeps going because he loves the grind and there's always something to get better at. And it's just seeing him officially be like, yeah, it's changing, it's getting different. I don't know if I can handle this anymore. It's not the same as it used to be. It's just it's weird, man. Like obviously we're 25. We're not old, but we're growing up, man. We're getting older. It's weird. All of the legends and things that we're used to when we were younger in college football is all going away, and it's a different era coming in now. It's crazy, especially with him going out. It's like officially ushered in the new era, it seems. But I thought it was a fantastic read. He's talking about the things that he said it didn't have the final effect, but it definitely went into it. Was that when he got back when Alabama lost to Michigan, that the players didn't act right in the locker room. They said that they didn't win with class. Maybe throwing tantrums, tossing helmets around the locker room, things like that. And then he said when they got back and they had their exit meetings, that players were asking, how much am I going to play next year? Are my targets going to go up? I got to get this many targets. Promise me this, or I've got it, or I'm leaving, or so and so at this school is making this. I had the same amount of production as him, if not a little bit better. Can you match this? And it's like he's saying that's not what they built their program on. They built their program on how can I help myself in this program win a national championship. And now it's focused on how can I get more money and and me. And so he said it's just he doesn't think the way he's done it is going to work nowadays, and he doesn't think that he can do it and perform to the best of his ability and think he's doing a good job. And that's just if he physically can't do it, it's not in his nature to do it. It's if he can't do it to the fullest of his ability and he thinks he's going to drag the program down. He said that's not what he wanted to do. He never wanted to drag the program down. So he said it was the right time. But the most Nick Saban thing of it all is he's interviewing coaches and getting ready for, acting like it's a normal day. And then 5 minutes later, he goes and tells the team that he's done. He's retiring. I mean, that literally worked until the very end. So, I mean, it's an incredible read. I don't like Alabama with a fiber of my being. Nick Saban's not my favorite person, but man, I like him and I respect the hell out of him. He's the greatest to ever do it. And you can't read this article and come away with any bad thoughts about Saban. If you had any before you read the article, or maybe even during, you're not coming away from that article with any hard feelings against Saban. Obviously I love it. I'm glad he's gone. But as an Alabama fan, I'm sure you're just like, man, it's bittersweet. And you're thankful for everything that he did because, man, what a career.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, too, like it made me respect his decision that much more because
Oh
it's
yeah.
like, knowing that he really didn't want to let go, but he had the awareness enough to go, hey, I just and honestly too, like you got to think Nick Saban's standards so high, so like even him going at 80% probably still would have been really good. You know
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean? Like it's not like he would have drugged the program down to 6-6 or whatever. I mean, honestly, he could have rolled out there and win 9 games, honestly, just on talent alone most of the time. So I think his standard's so high in the fact that he goes, I don't feel like I can do this at 100% because I know exactly what it takes to get through a whole calendar year, a whole season, what the grind is like. And he's like, I don't feel it's getting harder on me. I don't feel I can do it 100% of the capability I
Right.
need to anymore. So it just made me respect that he had that awareness to go, hey, like, even though deep down, I mean, I think that's why he was working the day of, because I think even the days leading up to this, I don't think he 100% knew for sure. I mean, I think that's why he was still working the
Yeah.
day of. I mean,
Yeah.
the way it sounded, he really didn't decide till about 5 or 10
Yeah.
minutes before working that meeting. I think he had a good idea, but I don't think he 100% had his mind made up. But I think deep down he really probably wanted to keep going, but I think he just realized, and you've seen so many coaches hang on too long and drag. I love Bobby Bowden, legendary coach, but that's a guy he hung in there too long. You know, so I give him credit for
Yeah.
him stepping away when he's really coming off what people think his best coaching job, did an
Oh
amazing
yeah.
job this past season. I mean, to kind of step away when you're coming off such a great job that he did, it just made me respect that a lot more, and of him realizing that. So thought that was really interesting. Um, and then as far as the coaching search goes, you know, obviously the media threw out Dan Lanning early on, which was an obvious candidate. But according to Chris Lowe in that article and kind of what we learned since then, Kalen DeBoer and Mike Norvell were kind of the two top choices from the beginning. Um,
Yeah.
you know, Saban hangs it up on a Wednesday afternoon on January 10th. I believe it was that Thursday, the 11th. Greg Byrne was in Seattle talking to Kalen DeBoer. There was also some really deep conversations with Mike Norvell that day, that evening. So they were kind of, I don't know if he ever had a face to face maybe with Norvell. I don't know if it got that far to a face to face interview, but he was definitely in the mix. And according to Chris Lowe's article, that Florida State people were pretty nervous he was going to leave at certain points of
Yeah.
the evening. So, but it seemed like Kalen DeBoer was kind of the main choice all along. And then once Greg Burns sat down with him, and I thought it was interesting. The first question he asked him was, and you've heard everybody say this after Nick retired.
I've
You
said it a
don't
hundred
want to,
times on this podcast.
yeah, you don't want to be the guy that follows Saban. You want to be the guy after the guy that follows Saban. And when Greg Byrne asked him that question, he goes, "Look, I'm just going to embrace it." You know what I mean? Like you can't shy away from it. Like you have to accept the challenge, but you know, appreciate that you're following a legend and a guy that left the program in such a good place, and realize like, you know, obviously you have to embrace it at the same time, but you have to be your own man as well. And
The
you
most
know,
the most badass quote he said was he said, only one guy gets to do it, and I want to be that guy. That
yeah,
I was like, I don't like
yeah,
Alabama. I was like, damn, that was cool.
yeah. No, I mean, I think because you have to realize too, these coaches and Josh Pate has said this a bunch of times on his show, and he talks about these coaches, these what he calls alpha coaches. Some of the you're talking about some of the top guys in this industry. They don't have the same mindset that the general public has.
You're
Like
right.
in their mind, they are like you have to have a little bit of ego. You know what I mean? And be like each one of these guys. I guarantee you, any of the top coaches in the country, really almost any, but you could ask any college football coach, and they each one of them thinks they're the best coach in the country. They think I can do that. Like I can be the guy that follow them. I know I'm up for that challenge. I know I'm good enough to take that on
Right.
and keep that standard going, keep that tradition going, keep that success going. Like they don't think like the general fans think in public. Like every fan of college football is like, man, I'd hate to be the guy following Saban. I've heard everybody say that. But trust me, those coaches and especially the top ones in the country, they think they can do it. And they should. Like
Yeah,
that's
you're
why
right.
they're as good as they are. Like you have to think any competitor has to think they're the best. You know what I mean? Like you have to have that mindset. So
Thousand
these
percent.
guys don't think like the general public and general fans think. I think people lose sight of that sometimes. So I just kind of want to make that point. Like Kirby Smart, just saying he thinks he could come over here and keep that going, and he could. Obviously, he has a reason to think that way. But any of those guys would feel that way. Dan Lanning would feel that way. Mike Norvell would feel that way. Kalen DeBoer, Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin, all those guys would have the same mindset because they have that confidence and that belief in themselves. So
Absolutely.
they don't think about it like the general, ordinary person and just a fan of it would feel like. So
Right. 100%.
but so I thought it was a very very well written piece. Honestly, it was one of the best articles I've read in a long
Yeah,
time. So
everybody needs to go read it.
I highly encourage. It's free. It's on ESPN.com. Definitely recommend reading it. I actually shared it on my personal Twitter account, um, which is on the bio of our Twitter account on it's X now, but at Saturdays underscore SDC. Both of our personal accounts are on that bio as well. So if you want to give us a personal follow, feel free to do that. Feel free to follow our Saturdays in the SEC account. Be sure to like and subscribe. Really appreciate all of that. But anything else you want to touch on? Any other spring questions that you're looking at before, or anything of the sort? I know we're really just in the first week, so we'll have a lot more updates to come. But now we got 16 spring practices to cover instead of 14, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, yeah. The teams are piling up, man. Here soon, we're gonna have 35 teams to cover, and we're gonna have to quit our day jobs.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, man, I've got all the. I actually have to update our header picture on our Twitter account because it's got all the helmets of all the teams, and I could barely squeeze the 14 in there. So I'm gonna have to find a smaller picture. I'm gonna have to find a different logo or something to get everybody in there. But it's that's something I got to update. So I'm gonna be hunting for that, trying to get us a new header to get all 16 helmets in there. But it's gonna be a challenge though. But anyways, we really appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back. Maybe not next week, probably the following week after that. We'll maybe might have some more college football playoff news by then. Would not surprise me. Conference realignment we think's right around the corner. Probably, if I had to just estimate, probably sometime this summer or sooner. I would feel like so. Be sure to keep tuned in on us, and we'll keep you updated as we move through spring and summer. But appreciate everyone tuning in, and we will catch y'all next time.
Thank you, guys.